Inside the Birds is back. What's going on, everybody? Geoff Mosher, Adam Caplan here for an Inside the Birds. We are in the off season. There's a lot of news surrounding the Philadelphia Eagles. Unfortunately for them, Adam, it has nothing to do with the playoffs, as they have to watch other teams fight it out to become a Super Bowl champion. Not in the same space that they were in last year. But a lot of big decisions have already been made, and a lot of big decisions still lie around the corner. We'll get into that. We are now in what I like to call that little zone, right, between the end of the regular season and then the beginning of when we get into true off-season content, free agency draft, things like that. So some of our programming, like the intel with Greg Cosell, things of that, we're bridging the gap from now to then. We've got to get through the coaches here, the staff, any other changes before we and then you and I will be at the Senior Bowl here
Yeah.
not too long from now, and then things will really start. The gears will start to really get going.
Yeah. So what happens here is we'll up stuff, some more names we've heard. Then, yeah, we'll be at the Senior Bowl, but it's really coaching now, free agency, which is huge. Boy, the Eagles free agency is it could be wild in terms of releases, re-signings. Who knows? They've got a lot of decisions to make, a little bit more than I anticipated when I started putting my list together and potential decisions here. And then we get into the draft coverage. So yeah, it's going to be a very busy offseason for us here at Inside the Birds.
Yeah, doesn't it feel like these 2 weeks, when especially when you know that there's going to be coaching changes at some level, they always feel like an eternity. Then you look back on it and you realize all of it happened in a very condensed amount, especially when you're doing a head coaching search, which, at the moment we are not. But
Yeah.
when you do that, those days feel like years. And then you look
Oh,
back and you're like, man, that was really just about 8 or 9 days since one guy got fired and the other guy got hired, but it feels like an
well,
eternity.
back in 2013, boy, the Chip Kelly one took forever because it took weeks, not
Oh
days,
yeah.
because of he changed his mind.
Yep.
He turned them down and he changed his mind and decided to come back. A lot of people probably forgot about that. But yeah, usually, but the problem that you have is because of the interview rules, the Eagles can't get to some of these coaches. And I'm talking to other teams, like that's the thing that they understand. Like you can't have open season on coaches who are coaching right now. You can't talk to them
Right.
unless they did a virtual. There was some leeway in the rules, but you couldn't do anything face to face. But now with these coaches out of the playoffs, starting today, the 22nd, the guys are out of the playoffs. You could start getting to these guys.
Definitely. And so we'll get into that. I encourage everybody on our normal Inside the Birds platform to make sure they check out the final episode of Q&A, which aired last week. It was very, very thought-provoking and answered a decent number of questions. And I would also say for our Patreon members, now's a good time as you wait for the staff to get settled and see what changes are made to go back and watch some of the interviews that we did with John DeFilippo, former Eagles quarterbacks coach, champion, Super Bowl champion with the Eagles, to hear his words on the offense, the quarterback play, the wide receiver play, the preparation. He covered everything. We covered all of it throughout the season. And I think if you went back and listened to some of his breakdowns and analysis, might help answer some questions or really give you an idea of what the Eagles offense was like this year and some of the good things, some of the bad things about it.
For sure. Yeah. And that's patreon.com/Inside the Birds if you want to become a member. And we got a live stream coming up soon, a Q&A. We got to figure out if it's worth doing one this Wednesday, but it'll always be every 2 weeks. The question is, do we need to do another one this week? Um, if something strange happens, you never, this team, you just don't know from covering this thing. This team for over 20 years, every once in a while they surprise you, but right now we're not expecting any major surprises, but you never know.
I think we've definitely reached the point of Eagles offseason that we've reached at times in the past where we start to get texts from people we know around the league, and they're very short texts like, what the hell? Like, what's going on? Like they're not,
Oh,
they're just questions. People are asking us, like,
yeah.
what is going on over there? So that's when you know that you've reached peak Eagles offseason, when you start getting those text messages. All right. As Adam mentioned, you can find all the Patreon content, patreon.com/Inside the Birds. And we do have some great announcements for our Patreon members coming soon. We had a couple of new members this past week. We want to thank them for hopping aboard and thank everybody for taking part in our Ask ITB live streams. 15, 20 people. It's been an amazing experience. Inside the Birds is brought to you by our friends at Ocean Casino Resort in Atlantic City. It is the exclusive Jersey Shore resort of Inside the Birds. So let's recap a little bit, Adam. On our last podcast that dropped, we talked about the meeting that was going to take place, the real one between Nick Sirianni and the Pillars that involved Jeffrey Lurie, Julian Lurie Howie, and the discussions that needed to be had. We know that a big move has already been made in the firing of Sean Desai, and that it was Nick Sirianni who fired Sean Desai. So as of this moment, all signs, if you're letting Nick Sirianni make those decisions, it all appears that Nick Sirianni is being given an opportunity to fix this and bring in people. So, what is your kind of viewpoint on that?
Yeah, no question. Uh, this is just an opinion based on kind of knowing how things go there. Yes, the season was the second half of the season was terrible, considering how they finished, losing 6 out of 7. We were talking about how the owner, how we've known Jeffrey's not happy. No, but I got to think he calmed down. It's if for the people wanting Sirianni to be fired, I understand your anger. Okay, I get that, but this is not the Cleveland Browns here. The Eagles don't do that. Yeah, they do fire a lot of assistants, hire and fire, even when they win. But Jeffrey does not have a history of not being fair as head coach and not giving him time. Like you could say, okay, well, Doug shouldn't have gotten fired in 2020. Well, it wasn't really about that. It was more about they had a disagreement on staffing, and quite frankly, even some of Doug's, is I think you put this out then 3 years ago. Some of Doug's assistants came to Doug and said, "Listen, what the owner wants, you should do," and he was not going to do it. So okay,
Right,
but
right.
Jeffrey is a thoughtful person, and I was, to be honest with you, when we heard that we heard some things behind the scenes, I just felt like if Jeffrey could just see this through, and yeah, Nick's got to be told, like, you got to do a better job. We all know that the offense got away from him, the team collapsed. Thought he would kind of bring Jeffrey back. I mean, he'd bring Nick back, and talking to some coaches who know coaches with the Eagles, assistants is what we're talking about. I guess the Eagles assistants who are still there are acting or are telling these guys that they think Nick's back. Coaching agents that have coaches on staff, they're acting like Nick is back. So barring I guess the only thing you put an asterisk on, what if in like a week, Jeffrey's not happy with, what Nick and Howie decide here. Obviously, Nick will in the end make the call. I mean, I can't imagine I mean, they're going to take it another week. I
Right.
mean,
Right.
I mean,
I agree. I think that we can't slam the door on anything until we find out, until we see what kind of changes, more so people brought in than leaving. I do believe the same thing you are when you hear of certain coaches that they're reaching out to. They're all operating under the assumption that Nick Sirianni will be there. So, as we sit here, I feel more confident about it right now than when we did our last podcast
yes,
because the meeting hadn't happened yet and he had
correct.
been given no authority to do anything at that moment. No meeting with the press either, which by the way still has not happened. He hasn't
Yeah.
had his annual, and until that happens, even though we've seen things happen after that, I'll leave the door a sliver open for something that
Oh,
happened. But
are you are you
uh,
referring to Doug when he said Mike Rowe's coming back, and then 24 hours later he wasn't? Is that what you're talking about?
I am. And wait, I'm trying to remember though. With Doug, didn't they have was there a press conference in 2020? Well, it would be in 2021, right? But after the 2020 season, where I can't remember if they didn't have a
He,
press conference or they did, and then
oh,
they fired him after it. I'd have to go
I
back
don't
and look.
remember. Yeah, I don't remember. But
Yeah.
anyway, the bottom line is, barring something highly unforeseen, like they're not in alignment. This is a term that owners and GMs use, alignment. So we're going to use this one. Les Jeffrey's not in alignment with the new defensive coordinator and whatever changes they make to the assistants and also the offense, it appears he's going to be remaining. I mean, it would be quite the shock because again, we've known for some days now that Nick has been looking around and the GM's been looking around, and
Hmm.
others too are helping, and just, this is the way it's usually done, and we'll see what happens. But man, what's amazing is as we transition to the next subject here,
Hmm.
these West Coast offensive play callers or assistant coaches, this must be like a record for these guys getting interviews. Easily 12 guys so far, or 10 to
Yeah.
12 guys are getting requests around the league.
Yeah. Oh,
Crazy.
yeah. No doubt about it. That's the problem the Eagles sort of confront here as they look for guys is that, they want guys, and so do so many other teams, and then it comes down to, well, whose situation's better for a potential candidate. If you want to be an
Yeah,
offensive coordinator, I think, and maybe this is factors into the decision, the Eagles are a pretty good spot, right? I mean, with all the talent they have on offense,
yeah,
at wide receiver, on the offensive line, the quarterback who was, MVP candidate 2 years ago. Compare that to some of the other teams right now looking for offensive coordinators, and you might think the Eagles situation's really good, but you might also think it's kind of volatile, right? Because you may only have a year. If this guy doesn't win
exactly.
10, 11, 12 games, or if it doesn't look good, you might be out. So you have to consider that. But as far as looking for a place to help succeed, I mean, compare the Eagles' offense to a lot of others' offense, and you have to think it would be attractive from that standpoint alone. Um, I do want to go back to just Jeffrey's decision making here and what you said, because I feel like if Nick stays, it is the right decision. You were right. You said, look, a lot of fans want him fired, but you got to understand that there's a bigger picture here, and I do think it would look bad. It's not just a bad look; it's a bad process to fire coaches that far removed from a Super Bowl. I know he didn't win it, came within a James Bradbury holding of winning it, and having already gone through with Doug, who, by the way, it wasn't just with the Super Bowl. He was a Super Bowl, then the playoffs, one bad year, fired. If you
Yeah,
did
it
that
was
to
3 years.
Nick,
After
right,
3 years.
right, it's
Yeah.
it's 3 years, but it's just one bad year, fired, right? So it would look really, really rough, and that might make Eagles kind of good coaches reluctant. I think you only do it, Adam, if you knew you were going to hire a veteran coach who has been a proven winner, say like a Belichick, right? Let's say he wanted to
Sure.
come to the Eagles. We were talking about that, right? Then I guess it makes a little bit of sense because you have a win now team. At least you think. You just got to make sure you tighten up that defensive personnel, and then you bring in a proven winner, whether it's an Andy Reid who's not available. I'm just giving that type of stature. But if you were going to fire Nick Sirianni, then start up this new search, and then go hire some young, tight ends coach for the Rams, right? Because you really are wowed by him, then you're just basically doing the same thing that you did with getting Nick Sirianni. Like it wouldn't make sense to me. You would go hire somebody who's not proven anything to come in here and win when that's what you thought about Nick Sirianni 3 years ago. And for the most part, he won until the last 6 weeks of the season. So
Yeah.
unless it was going to be some regarded coach who's got rings and who you felt like could just come in here and win right away, I don't think it would have made much sense.
Yeah, I would just add this. So, like the big name, the two hottest guys are Ben Johnson, who was the hottest name coming into the season. He's the hottest name where we are now, where the Lions made the championship game. They'll play this Sunday at the Niners. But the other guy, Bobby Slowick. I mean, Bobby Slowick came out of nowhere. He never even been a position coach. He was an
Right.
analyst for goodness sake for the Niners. Like, okay, so on your point, okay, he's the hot guy right now. I get that. Like, a lot of teams want to talk to him. But how do you're not hiring a scheme. You're hiring a leader of men. We need to remember that when Chip was the head coach, you were hiring a guy with an unbelievably successful scheme, a guy that did some things in college which most coaches won't do in terms of you're going for it on fourth down on your own 20 or 30. Of course, he didn't do much of this here, Philly, but whatever. He was the hot name. But be careful what you wish for. So, man, got to be careful with that stuff. Like there are only so many Sean McVays going around. There's actually only one. We need to remember that.
100%. And everybody's going to trying to get from that tree anyway.
Yeah. Oh,
Uh,
big time.
yeah.
Big time.
Yeah, no, good stuff. Good stuff. So we'll see. I really think that is patience. I went and looked back on some coaches, and I know it's not apples to apples, but I went and looked back at John Harbaugh's record. He did have a 5-win season about 2 or 3 years after the Super Bowl. They really
Hmm.
struggled that year. Now I get it. You say, well, he won the Super Bowl, so it bought him some credibility, right? So he
Did
so he went
good. Go
5 and
with Harbaugh.
11 in 2015, which is
Yeah.
3 years after they won the Super Bowl, and then the next year they're only 8-8, which by Raven standards is not very good. But
Correct.
obviously, they had the foresight to know we've got a really good one here. Let's hang on to him. I looked at Mike Tomlin, who's been in the playoffs almost pretty much I think every single year, if I'm not mistaken. Correct? Or I'm sorry, no, not every. He's had a even or winning record every single. He's never had a losing record as a head coach, but he did have some years where it's 8 wins, 9 wins, 9-7, and he did have a collapse a couple of years ago. They haven't fired him. I get it. He won a Super Bowl, but those are two really good coaches. I just think that you can't you can't take a guy who's won 11 games and just had a one bad stretch and then be like, it would have been really dicey for me. I get that he's got to show more, and next year, all bets are off. There's no like, you're this far removed from a Super Bowl or this or that. He's got to have the answers next year and start to be competitive again. But I just think again, I said at the end of the last pod, you got to give a coach a chance to grow some, and I think
Sure.
that they're making the right move here. All right, so let's get into play callers, offensive, defensive, all that in a second. First, let's pause to hear a word from our friends at Ocean Casino Resort in Atlantic City.
Go to get your game on. Go for the beers. Go for the cheers. Go for the hit and the hits. Go for the stakes and the stakes. Go to get your parlay on. Go to get your party on. Go for the scene. Go for the screens. Go for the gallery. Go for the win. Go to Ocean. Visit theoceanac.com to plan your visit.
All right. Offensive play callers, defensive play callers. So we know Sean Desai is no longer with the team. He has been fired. Now, the one thing that's interesting, Adam, is Matt Patricia. Nothing on him yet. So
Yeah.
I don't know if that's an ominous sign that like he's under consideration. I don't know what's going on there with Matt Patricia, but he's available.
Wow.
I mean, he's still on the payroll, as we know, under contract.
So I had not even thought about that. Now that you mention it, I mean, I could see if they keep him on to coach D line or system D line or linebackers, whatever the case may be, because he's coached positions before in defense. But yeah, that is an odd one that he's still here. But again, we don't know. They might have. Who knows? But it's a very early Monday morning. That the next 48 hours, it might a lot of guys might go. It's just depending on what kind of success they have with looking at who's available. But yeah, look, we talked the last show. We heard they're looking into a lot of these West Coast offensive coaches, not necessarily any particular position. It could be a quarterback's coach. It could be passing game specialist, whatever the case may be. Talk about Zach Robinson, who's a quarterback's coach, passing game coordinator for the Rams, who was drafted by the Bengals. Shane Waldron, we talked about, who was interviewing with teams. Seahawks OC. Clint Kubiak's a guy to keep an eye on. Who's now he obviously can't interview right now in person because he's offensive passing game specialist with the Niners. He was the OC for the Vikings for a while. Cleveland could be in on him and other teams. From that Gary Kubiak tree, of course.
Yeah.
His dad won a Super Bowl with the Broncos as a head coach, replacing John Fox. And then there are a couple of new names we have.
Yeah, before we just get the new name, your point on Shane Waldron, a guy who has been in Seattle, who's also with, he came up through the Rams before Seattle, right? Wasn't he a McVay guy before he went to Seattle?
Yes, and then before that, Washington. I think that's where they knew each other.
Yes, yeah. I spoke to a high-ranking executive on an AFC team just to see what he knew, and he said, he didn't know for sure. He goes, but he almost basically said he's got to be on the Eagles list because why wouldn't you? He's smart. He's a really good coach. He's got a lot of great credentials, and he'd be perfect for what the Eagles are looking for. So we'll see if that name comes up. So one of the new names that came up, Adam, that we heard is a guy who's actually been with the Eagles before under the Doug Peterson regime, and that would be Jim Bob Cooter, one of our favorite names in the industry. Now, Jim Bob was with the Eagles as wasn't he like either a special projects guy or
Correct.
Yeah, and he's also got does he have crossover with Nick Sirianni?
He did 1 year. Yep, he did. He did 1 year in 2020. He was an offensive quality control coach. I'm sorry. There's another guy we're going to talk about in a second. Jim Bob Cooter. You mean Jim Bob Cooter?
Yeah, Jim Bob Cooter. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. He well, he was here 2 years ago, but you mean in terms of somewhere with the Colts?
I knew he was here, and I knew he was with the Colts, but I was just wondering if when he was with the Colts, was he with Nick there? Was there any
crossover? Oh, the first time around. Yeah, that's a good question. I will tell you in a second.
He was with the Colts in
like for 4 years. I would think 1 year they worked together. I think.
Oh no, he's with the Colts now. I'm sorry.
Right. This is his second time around. Yes, he was their OC many moons ago. I think.
No, because he was with the Jaguars last year, the Eagles the year before that under Doug as a consultant in 2020. No, I'm sorry, he was under Nick as a consultant in 2021.
Correct.
He was
Yep.
with Nick his first year. I'm sorry, I get him and Doug mixed up because then he went and worked for Doug the following year in Jacksonville. So in 2021, he was here in Philadelphia with Nick. The following year after that, he went to Jacksonville to be the pass game coordinator. And then this past season, he was in Indianapolis as the OC.
Right. Jim Bob was with well before Nick. He was actually okay. He was with the Colts many moons ago when Peyton Manning was wrapping up his career. He was a
Right.
low-level assistant. Yeah. Okay. I get it.
That was
Okay.
the first time, right? Yeah.
Right. And he worked with Matthew Stafford. Then he got promoted as the offensive coordinator. Got fired there. Running backs coach for the Jets. So you like that he's well-rounded. Then he was that consultant in 21 with the Jaguars. Doug hired him in 22 to be his pass game coordinator. Then Steichen hired him as their OC because he was with the Eagles in 21, so they know each other. But Shane calls the plays. But again, the key here is, well, why would he be on the list? We've heard from a couple people around the league that expect the Eagles to have interest in him because he knows this scheme. This goes back 2 years. He's an experienced offensive coordinator, play caller. Now, here's the question: if they actually do interview him and they actually hire him, we'll see. We have no, he's the OC without play calling. We'll see what they do here with James Robert, Jim Bob Cooter. But would they see? This is the thing a lot of people have asked me. I think it's a great question. What adjustments to the scheme was dead this season? The opponents seem to figure it out. We've heard a lot of people said, okay, well then what changes would they make? Because Jim Bob Cooter's not a West Coast guy per se.
Right.
So you have to see.
Yeah. So while he has all this great experience and he's been with a lot of teams and he is regarded as a good offensive coach, Adam, the point that you hit on the head is that he was with Indianapolis and he wasn't the play caller. Shane Steichen was. So it's almost like the same situation. You got Nick Sirianni, good leader, not the play caller. Now, I believe Jim Bob did call plays in Detroit. So it's not like he's never done it, but it's, I think people want you to bring in some like one of these hot names and you're going to do something good with this offense. And you're bringing in a guy who he's been in 3 different places the last 3 years and he wasn't calling plays in the last spot he was at. I don't know. There's something about that doesn't really move the needle for me compared to what I thought the direction the Eagles really wanted to go in. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, but see, here's the thing though. Okay, Zach Robinson, I don't believe has called plays before. Clint Kubiak has. We're going to give you another new name we heard over the weekend in a second, but there are a couple other West Coast offensive guys who have not called plays before, but they're with teams.
Yeah,
who are like the darlings. So that's the thing. It's like, but I would say this though, Bobby Slowick's a great example. Never called plays before. Some years ago, he's worked for PFF as an analyst. Okay, he'd never been a position coach. And yet now he's one of the best play callers in the league. So I've kind of changed my mind on that. There's a saying with coaches, you never know until you get there.
yeah, that's
so
fair.
We shouldn't be against a position coach doing it. I know it's a little bit of a leap of faith. I get that. You don't know. You just don't know. But it's why gathering information is so important. Talk to as many people, getting references. Hey, not only how smart this guy is, does he command a room? How does he handle that? Does he understand your scheme? Whatever the case may be, because you want to feel good about it, rather than just hiring some guy because he works for a guy who's brilliant like Sean McVay. You got to be careful with that. You want to get the right guy.
Okay, that's a good point. I guess my retort would be maybe it's not about the play calling, but at least if you brought in someone, a direct descendant of the McVay or Shanahan tree, like who even if they haven't called plays like Zach Robinson, you're adding a dimension to your offense with shifts and motions and things that you don't have. I feel like with the addition of Jim Bob Cooter, like what's the difference between him and Brian Johnson? I mean, if it's still going to be Nick Sirianni's base offense and it's always going to be Nick Sirianni's offense, just with a different set of eyes, I'm not sure that that's the exact remedy, but like, that's just me speculating. I don't know. You know what I'm saying?
I hear you.
It just feels like more of the same. Yeah.
No, I that was actually my initial thought when we had heard the name a couple days ago. I'm like, okay, I get it. He was in Philly. Nick knows him. I get that, but does that mean, this is what I was getting at a couple minutes ago, or does that mean you're going to run exactly the same scheme? Well, okay, is Jim Bob going to have any leeway? That's what I was trying to say earlier. I mean, I don't know. Again, we didn't say they're hiring him. We believe he's on their list
Right.
of a good, really good list of coaches. But anyway, it's an interesting situation because Brian Johnson's he's still there, okay, with the OC title. How would this work? I mean, you're going to allow him to look for another job. We know he's interviewed for 3 head coaching jobs. Okay, it's kind of weird, but we'll see what happens.
There you go. We will see. Another name that we came across, and this one was maybe the biggest head scratcher for me, given what I thought the Eagles were looking for from an experience and a play calling standpoint, is you mentioned Bobby Slowick, but it's the quarterbacks coach for the the Houston Texans, and his name is Gerard Johnson. And if that sounds familiar to some folks who really get into the nitty gritty of the Eagles roster every year, especially around OTAs time and camp time, he was an Eagle. I believe he was what year? 2011, right? So he had to be with the Eagles. Trying to think, I guess under the late days of the Andy Reid as an OTA body or something like that. Out of
Correct.
yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he was what, Texas A&M quarterback?
Correct. In fact, the only reason I remember him, he was like the highest recruited quarterback in the country heading into Texas A&M, and was thought to be great. And he's a really sharp guy, but he just never made it. He never made it, and he was not even drafted.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, he's been in coaching since 17, mostly low level, and this is his first year, I believe, coaching a position. And boy, does it get any better than that than CJ Stroud? I mean, when you have a season like this, like the Texans, Stroud has one of the best seasons as a rookie quarterback in NFL history. You're going to get noticed. And by the way, it's a West Coast offense. And by the way, he works for Bobby Slowick.
Yeah.
So just one more thing. Gerard Johnson in 2022 was an assistant quarterbacks coach for the Vikings. And then before that, just low level stuff. But this would be very forward thinking. But you know what? You never really look. Andy Reid was never coordinator. I'm not putting him on Andy Reid's level. I'm just giving an example of sometimes you have to look at everything. You never know. I mean, you talk to him. He's on your list. Mike Tomlin, but he was only the Vikings coordinator for 1 year. He was like 7th on their list. It's going to be Russ Grimm. 15 years later, he's never had a losing season. Mike Tomlin hasn't won a playoff game since 16. But as you said earlier, he's never had a losing season. And you never know. You never know who you're talking to. It's just it's interesting. This one caught us by surprise over the weekend, but I checked into him and got some really good reports on him. But there's a saying, you don't know until you talk to someone. So we'll see if they decide to put a slip in for him.
Yeah, so now there's 2 trees. I mean, he broke into coaching in 2017 with the Niners. So he spent a year with Kyle Shanahan. Now, again, that was low-level coaching there. Actually, it was the Bill Walsh Diversity Coaching Fellowship, which is usually, that doesn't last the whole year. That's usually over by the end of training camp, and then maybe you get like something else. But he did it the following year again. No, 2 years later with the Colts when Nick Sirianni was there, and then he earned a quality control job for 2 seasons with the Colts, 2020, 2021. So he does have some overlap here with Nick Sirianni. It's just, I don't know what this guy's influence is. Is he heavily influenced from his time with the Colts? Is he heavily influenced from the 1 year with Kyle Shanahan? He's also been in Minnesota as recently as 2022. Would that be Kevin O'Connell's first year? So that would be sort of that McVay Shanahan tree there. So yeah, but again, is he ready to just call plays now and be the type of offense? It just raises questions again. Right. It raises those questions about, is Nick Sirianni, looking for a play caller with experience, or is he just looking to add to his room different minds? And then who will call the plays? So the big question becomes of this, Adam, is the Brian Johnson situation. It feels like it's very awkward. I mean, he's got to know that the Eagles are sitting around calling coaches, and looking for play callers and things. But at the same time, he's interviewing for head coaches. So this is an awkward situation. I'm sure if you shot the Eagles up with True Serum, they're hoping he gets a head coaching job.
I don't know. I don't want to speak for them. I don't know what they're going to do with Brian Johnson. It's just a little awkward, as you said. That I would agree with. It's just
because they would get something for that, wouldn't they? Because he's a minority and he would get a head coaching job, right? Wouldn't they get drafted? Right,
but what it is it's like when Sean McDermott was fired, they were hoping the word wouldn't get out. Because Ron Rivera, I remember Ron went on record saying like they were hoping the word wouldn't get out that Sean was out. as Jim Johnson's replacement. If you recall, he went right to Carolina, which would still, but people would have said, well, wait a minute, I don't understand. He was just the Eagles DC. How's he going to Carolina? You know what I mean? But it's an awkward deal, man. We'll see what happens. But Gerard Johnson's an interesting name. Yeah, he's kind of new to, again, it's the first year he's running a room. I mean, I would think like anyone on offense for that Houston staff. You know what's interesting? I forgot. There's some other former Eagles assistants. Bill Lazor's on there, former quarterbacks coach for the Eagles under Chip.
Yeah, we talked about that last podcast. Don't see him coming back here though.
No,
was
no. Corey Unlin, Corey Unlin is on that staff.
Yep.
Yeah. Wow.
By the way, people love Corey Unlin. He's a well-respected position coach. I just happened to speak to a few people around the league this week, and Corey Unlin's name came up, and he was well liked. He was well respected. Didn't he become the defensive coordinator after he left here somewhere?
Detroit, I think briefly.
Yeah.
Detroit.
Yeah. I mean, Detroit's where before Campbell got there, Detroit is where good coaches go to die, right? I mean, like you're lucky to get a year or two before they're on to the next thing there.
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah, he right now he's their defensive passing game coordinator, whatever that. That could be a multitude of things.
Right.
Yeah. No, he. Yeah, I think. Yeah, he was 1 year, correct? Yeah, it was only 1 year though.
Right. Well, that's typical of the Lions before Campbell got there. A lot of a lot of turnover. All right, couple other names we didn't get to. First, Adam, whether your resolution is to save money, eat better, or stress less, because that's what people do in the New Year's. They make those kind of resolutions, right? HelloFresh is here to help you do all three. So say hello to your most delicious year yet with fresh ingredients and chef-crafted recipes at a price you're gonna love. And it's delivered right to your door. How efficient is that? All right. So let's say you've resolved to actually sit down and eat dinner around the table. Like it's very rare for us. We try, but it's rare at times. What do you do about those nights though, when your just schedule is packed? I come across these all the time. Well, that's when you turn to HelloFresh's lineup of quick and easy meals. That's like quick and easy. It's not just adjectives. That's what they're called. They're quick and easy meals. And it includes their 15-minute recipes designed to help minimize mealtime stress. And that is something that we could all use. That's our kind of meal. Anything that you can prepare that minimizes stress. All right. Every time I make a HelloFresh meal, whether it's the quick and easy or just one of their normal meals, me and my family are blown away by the freshness, the taste, and the overall quality. I know I've said this before, but the shrimp Creole stew is still my favorite meal. It is just delicious. Feels like I'm right there in New Orleans. I swear. I know it sounds sacrilegious, but it was that good. All right. But hey, HelloFresh makes food for everybody. They make great chicken meals, steak meals, vegetarian meals. You name it, you want it, they got it. All sorts of variety. So you got to go to HelloFresh.com/EaglesFree and use code EaglesFree, all one word, to get free breakfast for life. Who doesn't want that? Right? Free breakfast for life. You get a one breakfast item per box while the subscription is active. That's free breakfast for life at HelloFresh.com/EaglesFree with the code EaglesFree. That's all one word, EaglesFree. Act now for America's #1 meal kit. All right, give me another name, Adam, that we should discuss here.
I'm going to bring this up because we've been asked a ton, and let's just explain. So Frank Reich's name has been brought. Everyone's asked us about Frank Reich. When we talked about this after he got fired by the Panthers, we said it, first of all, Nick and Frank are close. It's not like he needs to talk to, like they talk a lot. So what he made, what we had reported at the time, and it wound up, it just didn't happen. It just wound up at the time they felt they didn't need it, but they discussed it back 3 years ago. Hiring a senior offensive assistant, someone who's been there, done that, been a head coach, been a coordinator. Now, Marcus Brady has that title now. He's still under contract with Eagles. Now, Frank Reich fired Marcus Brady. So that would be kind of awkward if Frank was brought in. But again, they're not, if they look at Frank Reich at all, it would be for a senior level, help be a voice of or resource for Nick, if they did it all. But I know it's sort of out there in the coaching world that thinking like maybe if Frank wants to come out of his semi-retirement, he's owed a lot of money and he's got a lot of years left. And he was pretty beat up by the experience from what we understand. Just the whole experience, it didn't go like he thought. Obviously, got fired
Yeah.
before the
Well, I
first
think
year.
I think 2
Yeah.
years of that. I mean, he's probably coached for the two, wackiest owners, back to back there with
Ah,
the Indianapolis Colts,
we'll see.
Irsay, and Tepper. That cannot be easy on a
Right.
man's soul.
Exactly. Fair point. So basically, we'd heard he was just needed to decompress for a while. But again, if they did look at him, you're just looking for a senior level, be a resource, voice of reason, whatever Nick needs. Im- but that would be it. I mean, it's not play calling. Hell no.
Right.
That's that I don't know where that would come from. That would make no sense. Frank has not done a good job calling plays pretty much everywhere he's been. Chargers fired him. Well, he called the plays with Carolina for the most part. They handed him to Thomas Brown. They took him back. The offense was abysmal there. Colts, it was good to start, then it got away from him. He's actually really good at coaching receivers. Probably good to work with going back to the Chargers.
Yeah, he was a wide receivers coach first, right? But that was his first kind of coaching
Really good.
jobs. Yeah.
I in fact I think I'd have to look it up, but I think with Indy he got reassigned after he retired. Bill Polian hired him. I think he was maybe quarterback first, then receiver, something like that. But I heard he's outstanding with receivers. Just
Yeah, I could see there being a role for him, but I think you just nailed it on the head. He's never been known, despite which, I mean, I think we've talked about it and I think it's out there, but he's never been known as an expert play caller, which always surprised me when people were like, bring in Frank right now, bring in Frank right now. It's like,
for what?
everybody just remembers the Philly special and that he was a big part of that. And, but he was not a play caller in Philadelphia. He was 1/3 of that quarterback cocoon with Doug and John DiFilippo. And he did a fine job, obviously, but it just wasn't, that was not his ask.
Well, here's what he did. Okay, let's move on a second. Here's exactly what he did. Okay, talking to you. He was a great resource for Wentz. John was the guy, coached them hard, but they got along. John told us on Patreon. In fact, he visited Carson at Manners Camp 2 years ago. They had a great talk. So they were fine. It was nothing like people said. But as far as Frank was obviously would help Doug and Gabe planning during the week, which was very important, and help Carson out. He was just a good voice for Carson to hear. But in terms of developing like a play caller, no, that's not what he's really good at. So people need to get it to move off of that. That's not why at this point of his career you would bring him in. That's just not what you do.
He was also in charge of third down, right? And John DiFilippo did red zone, I believe.
Yeah, it was Grow and Frank did third down. Flip did
red zone.
Yeah, red zone, yes.
Yeah. So again, that's play design more than play calling. Josh McDaniels, we talked about him last pod, only because the Eagles interviewed him to be a head coaching candidate. It was really down to him and Nick Sirianni before they decided on Nick Sirianni. McDaniels would then next year get the coach. The Raiders did not work out for him. He is still considered a good play caller. But you do wonder, does he follow Belichick if Belichick winds up getting that Atlanta job or somewhere else?
I agree with you. Yeah, I would say in terms of Josh McDaniels, again, he runs a different scheme. He doesn't run West Coast, it's completely different. It's a multi-tight end system, shifts. It's the Ron Earhart system that Belichick learned when he worked for the Giants. And that's what Josh has run his entire career. And Eagles probably knew that when they interviewed him. So that one, I mean, that one, we talked about the last show. So I can't put a high probability on them looking into him. I mean, they know him. Obviously, they went through the whole thing. So it's not much to learn there. And by the way, he's still under contract for a while with the Raiders. So it's kind of like they say in coaching, he's coaching for free because there's an offset. And that's the thing with guys who are fired. You bring him in. Frank Reich's owing I don't know how many millions. Oh, wow.
Yeah, a lot of money. In fact, he could just take whatever job he wants and just cash checks from his life.
Well,
yeah.
The on Frank, before we get out of here, there was an interview. It might have been with the Charlotte Observer. I don't remember. I just remember reading that he was I don't know if he said retired, but I'm done for now or something.
He did.
Like he just needed to take a step back.
Yeah, he did definitely. He gave a vibe that he was. You put it best, that he was kind of like, I need a break. I'm a little beat up here.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Good stuff. All right, we'll get into the defensive coordinator in a second. Losing really sucks. Eagles fans are really having trouble, I'm sure, watching the playoffs and not seeing the Eagles in it. Watching games that are not your favorite team sucks in the playoffs, but so is finding good tickets online. That's why you need Game Time. It's the fast, easy way to buy tickets for sporting events, concerts, and theater shows near you. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. And right now on the Game Time app, you are just 2 taps away. That's all. You just pick up your phone, 2 taps away. Very easy from tickets to see any of the local sports teams. In fact, the Sixers are hot. Go see the Sixers, right?
Yeah.
Flyers. How about the Flyers? They're playing really well. Go see them or any of the local college teams. Go see a comedy show. Go see a concert. The best part is Game Time offers event cancellation protection and even job loss protection. Does anybody else offer that? I think that's fantastic. Game Time is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. They've got all-in prices that show you the total up front, and you can see the view from your seat, so you know exactly what to expect at checkout. Game Time's also obsessed with helping you save money. Their zone deals let you pick the section, while Game Time picks the seats for the best savings. With the Game Time guarantee, if you find tickets in the same section and row for less money, Game Time credits you 110% of the difference. So download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code BIRDS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and use the redeem code BIRDS for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, defense. Well, the Eagles need a new defensive coordinator. We know that. And here's the interesting one name that we came across. It's fascinating for a lot of different reasons, but I almost think it's fascinating because the style of defense that this man is known to run has sort of been the style that the Eagles have tried to avoid lately. And that would be Wink Martindale. Wink Martindale is a name that you and I both heard in the last few days to keep an eye on. I'll say it.
Yeah,
It's sort of like people feel like there's a natural correlation there.
I mean, this is just, we get a lot of coaching rumors like from other coaches from other teams, like, hey man, keep an eye on Wink here, keep an eye on Wink here. I'm like, I just can't see it. Only for one reason. He just left the Giants. He had a fallout with Brian Dable. Would you want to go here where you know that, and he may know some coaches here, I don't know, but where if you do your homework, you kind of know that the head coach will be on the hot seat going into the season. Do you want that? Don't you want more stability? I don't want to say I dismiss the stuff that we heard, but
yes, but I mean, just listening to the way you set that up, talking about you just got fired by the Giants. Do you want to go to Philadelphia?
Or did he resign, whatever.
Or yeah, whatever that is. Yeah. My brain shifted to go to Philadelphia and kick Brian Dable's ass twice a year. Because Wink is wired like that. I don't know Wink real well. I've met him like once or twice, and he's just an interesting dude, but I feel like he's wired like that, you know?
It's only 2 games, but or 3 in playoffs. But bottom line is, it's all it is a rumor. There's nothing hard on that one. So, I don't know. Well, let's put it this way. If you're Roseman or Sirianni, wouldn't you check into what he wants to do? Wouldn't you call his agent?
Of course.
Yeah, of course. And I would. I mean, if you and I were on the show, he's like my first call.
Yeah.
Because they know him. I mean, this season wasn't great for him. They bunch of injuries, whatever. It happens. You're not going to be great every year, but guy's one of the best in the league. So, that's one we'll look into as the week progresses. And if it happens, good. If they actually call, if they bring him in, great, because he's looking to coach. But you know what? He also would like to be a head coach, talking to guys that know him. So, someday, maybe he will.
I think he'd almost be good for Howie in that he would challenge. Howie likes to be challenged, and Howie's good when his back is against the wall. If you're going to hire Wink Martindale and you look at what you got right now on defense, and Wink Martindale is going to want to blitz, you're looking at your defense and saying, there's no way this defense can run a Wink Martindale style. We're not going to be able to cover anybody one-on-one in any situation. So it would challenge Howie to really have to go out there, draft, like the Giants. The Giants got rid of zone corner, obviously James Bradbury, right? And they draft Deontay Banks, who's a really good, athletically traded up man coverage corner. They already had Adoree Jackson, who was very athletic. So Howie would really have to go out there at linebacker and corner, especially, and find guys who can specialize in college in man and press man coverage.
Yeah, I don't know.
Or the NFL. I'm sorry, I didn't mean just college, just free agents too.
I don't know about linebacker though. I don't know about that.
No, maybe not.
Yeah, but I agree with you. Corner, yeah. Well, they have to. Obviously, it's their number one need right now going forward. They got to reshape the quarterback room. But no, you're right. We'll see. I'm not saying I'm skeptical, but I'm just I just think the guy's got to have options. Again, there's nothing hard on this one. We're told to keep an eye on it. That's all. So
Yeah.
I'm not running with anything there. It's just like when we know that something's probably in the works, we'll mention it. If I don't know, are there any reports out there linking him here?
I haven't seen any reports out there.
Yeah,
It was just,
yeah.
it was another one where someone said, "Hey, this would make a lot of sense. Look into that." So I was like, "All right,
Yeah, for sure,
Yeah.
for sure. And look,
Yeah.
he's the best that's out there. Boy, it's just going to be some coaching search because again, potentially one definitely for sure is a D coordinator. We'll see what happens at the OC or however that offense shakes out. But then position coaches, you have no idea. This is the thing. Guys don't know if they're going to be back or not. It's kind of weird.
Yeah, definitely. All right. We went through the names in the last podcast of all the guys the Eagles signed. That's really about it right now. So we will continue to keep people updated. And if we need to do an emergency podcast, we will do an emergency podcast. That's going to do it for this episode of Inside the Birds, the leading podcast in Eagles intel. And as always, we thank you for flying with us inside the birds. Be sure to check out our friends at PHLSportsNation.com. They're enhancing the fans' experience with their coverage of all Philadelphia sports teams. For the fan, by the fan is their motto. So make sure you check them out at PHLSportsNation.com and on Twitter at PHLSportsNation.